an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Wizard's Dilemma. Pages 293 through 354, which I believe are Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday morning. In this episode, the shit gets really, really real here, y'all. We get... she gets made an offer she can't refuse. Oh, I hate this. I hate it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Devin for commissioning this episode. Devin also bore with me when I had to unexpectedly reschedule because I had to travel for a funeral last Friday when this episode was originally scheduled. So thank you, Devin, for bearing with me on that. Guys, these chapters are really good. I was sitting next to Owen on the bed reading, and when I reached a couple points in this, I just stopped and I was like, you've got to read these. You've got to read them. I can't tell you how utterly unnerving the scene was with the lone power. I don't feel like I have often experienced that kind of hair on my arms raising into the air sort of feeling while reading. That's a tough thing to get across. It's not to say it never happens, but it's pretty rare, even in scenes where I'm supposed to be being creeped out. Oftentimes, I can feel a sort of distance from it that kind of ruins the effect for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. This scene where Nita is talking to who she thinks is Pralaya, and begins to realize that's not who she's speaking with anymore. And the ease and smoothness with which we transition into, oh, you're being given an option here. And how easy, in its way, a deal it is to make. This is really rough. And I was thinking the main obstacle was going to be Nita's mother protesting against whatever it was she chose to do, because her mother has to also be willing to pay that price, is what we were told. Now, that is sort of still in the air for me, where I'm wondering if I misunderstood exactly how that works, or maybe I didn't misunderstand, but it is going to be something that when Nita attempts to do whatever it is she's going to do, something about her mother will reject it. I don't know. You know, it's all sort of very abstract for me right now, the idea of her mother needing to be on board with this, and I'm not sure how literal they were being about it. But the concept of the price being something like this, it's not simply death. In some ways, sometimes dead is better. You know, truthfully, death can be easy. Death can be a simple shortcut. And I think for a lot of people, the concept of death isn't as scary as it is for others. And I don't know that Nita wouldn't make that trade. But when the option is a sort of death, except you're still alive, and you haven't even got a memory of the thing that you lost, other than this persistent sense that something is wrong or missing, that is a fucking horrific place to be. That's like living in a weird purgatory. And the knowledge that Doreen would still remember and know, Kit would still remember and know, but to the two of them, it would be as if she had died and some other version of her took her place. I really just don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see the world being better if she takes this option. But it's not my loved one dying. And she sort of screams that at Kit when he's trying to reason with her. And Kit says something like, you think I haven't imagined a million times what it would be like to be in your place? And that's all fair. It's just different to imagine, you know? It's always going to be different. And for me, you know, I've grown up enough that I have distance between me and my mother. If it were down to this for me, I wouldn't have the difficulty with allowing my mother to die that she has, because I have grown up and feel like I have gone through many of the major like stages in my life where you want your mother there. You really like feel like you need that presence in your life. And honestly, I have gotten more time with my mother than a lot of people get. So there's a part of me that would feel like I don't want her to go. I would be devastated. I will be devastated. But I also feel like there is some closure there, on my part at least, that obviously Nita doesn't have. She's in high school. She has a little sister who is going to be going through stuff after Nita's done with it and will need her mom. And so in order to get myself in the headspace Nita's in, I imagined what would happen if this were Owen. And you can hear what just the idea of that does to me. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, right. That's why you'd make this kind of deal. There's just... that kind of emotion, there's not a lot of reasoning with it. You don't get to be logical about it. Kit is saying all of the things that I was thinking. You know the lone power is not going to hold up his end of the deal. You know that this is poisoned somehow. You know that this is just straight up wrong. You are doing a wrong and bad thing if you do this. You know that you have a duty to the universe and were given a gift and you're spitting in their face, basically, by giving it back and denying your responsibility. All of that is true and makes sense. And yet, there comes a point where reason and logic just don't fucking factor in, man, anymore. You know? Like, you can do your best. Kit sure does his best. God bless him. And I'm glad that he... Oh my god. There was a bug on me. Anybody who's watching on camera knows that I didn't just freak out for no reason. Oh god, guys. It was like a little silver fish. Oh, that was so scary. I still have hope that Kit will help her come to her senses. But that's the thing, is she has to come to her senses. She can't be forced to choose. That's not a choice. So she has to choose purposefully, differently. I'm not sure. It seemed pretty obvious to me in the scene where she finally sees her mother right before the operation begins that she has made up her mind. So I truly do not know if her changing her mind, what could possibly accomplish that for her? What could make her have a change of heart and see things differently? Because I gotta tell you, he has tried all of the ways that I would have tried, and I don't know what more there is. I can't imagine what could manage it. And the whole thing is just, it becomes really tainted after that scene. And I believe that is part of what happens with Nita, because once she enters her mother's world, or it's not even, it's a test world, right? But it is her mom, actually. No, she did one test world and then she came back. That's right. And we didn't actually see that next to last one. That was when she had the conversation. Okay. So we go to Wednesday and Nita is having trouble focusing in school, understandably. Teachers keep on being like, why are you not paying attention? I really wanted her to be like, I'm sorry, my mom's dying. I guess physics aren't really super important to me right now, other than how they affect her. And she tries to find Kit, and she can't track him down. And I just really wanted to know whether this was, like, looking back, on purpose. Is this the lone power attempting to isolate her a little, or what? And she's thinking about the experiment, for lack of a better word, with Curl, where she got involved with helping Curl saving this world, and Curl didn't initially want to accept help, and everybody sort of had to insist. And I love how she's thinking about how not just what if somebody you ask to help messes up, how much would that suck for them to have fucked up the thing you're trying to do? But she also thinks it would be awful being in a situation where you might wind up blaming someone you knew well. And I love that that's the direction her mind goes in. It's not just like, it would suck if somebody tried to help and then they failed. It's about not just the failure for her, but also the fact that her relationship with that person would be changed from then on out. And that perhaps that person would feel too guilty, like God knows I would if I were in a situation where I were called on to help her with this. And then something went left and I felt like it was my fault and it was this little girl's mother. I would be wrecked over it. Like, forget it. So, it goes both ways. But I just really appreciated the compassion of her thought process here. Yama says, I thought that was something that her dad should have done. Called the school, tell them what's happening so they can talk to her teachers and not pressure her too much. Yeah, and it seems like later on her dad calls in order to let them have the day off from school because it's the day before the operation. But that's not the same thing as explaining what's happening. And, there's also a part of me that wonders if, Nita would have wanted him to do that. Because there's a part of Nita, that feels super private to me. And I wonder if she would really appreciate having this, be something known by the teachers at large. If that would be helpful. Or if their sort of, sympathy would leak through and she would find that she would be resentful of it or off-put it, or I don't know, but yeah, she says, Pralaya wanted to help, and Pralaya's entry in the manual when she'd taken a look at it had been impressive. He was old, as wizards went, a part-time local advisory on his planet with a lot of experience. But still, it was hard to let anybody else get involved in this, whether she knew them or not. There was so much riding on it, so much that could go wrong. So she goes to the church, and I love this description of how her mother had handled religion with her, because God knows I wish that my dad had handled it like this with me. Basically, her mother had been dragging, is the verb used here, both her and Dareen to church every Sunday for a minute. And then all of a sudden, she sort of turns a corner and decides not to make them go if they don't want to go. And says, I don't think it's right to try to make you believe what I believe just because I believe it. When you're old enough, I want you to make up your own minds. I wish to God that my dad had this attitude, because my mom basically put up no fight, despite the fact that she absolutely did not believe what my dad believed. She also respected the fact that he had a religion that he felt really passionate about and tried to make room for that, which I respect in a way, but it was also deeply frustrating as a kid to know that she didn't believe. And I assume she knew I also didn't believe. And watch me be brought. And I can't help but wonder if she was ever worried that my father would succeed in indoctrinating me, and then I would see her the way that he saw her, which was basically, he saw her as a witch who was going to hell in the end, was basically where he wound up. So I wonder if she was ever actually worried about that. There was really no risk. I started going to church with my dad when I was around 8 years old, and from day one, none of it made any sense to me at all. It was the only things that made vague sense were the purity of Jesus's teachings. Just love everybody, mind your own business, do your best, help other people, which is really the fucking basic shit. I mean, yeah, that does make sense. Otherwise, all of the other bullshit that gets built up around it, I was just like, what is this even? But my dad seemed to think it would just eventually sink in. I don't know what he thought. I really don't. But he really, until I was 18 and officially an adult, he made me go with him every single Sunday. And I also wound up going with him to Bible studies a lot. And it was just brutal. And this description of her experience, the things she heard in church sometimes seemed exactly right and true to Nita, and sometimes seemed so incredibly stupid and wrong that she was tempted to snicker, except that she knew better. Exactly. There were moments when the pastor was saying something that I was like holding my head in my hands, like, how can you even stand up there and say this? Are you serious? And then there were things that I was just like, oh, yeah, nope, that sounds right. Those were much rarer, I will say that. But it happened. And I love that the fact that her mother made it optional made Nita more interested in going, because it didn't feel like this was being shoved down her throat. And so, in this moment of crisis, she is feeling like she needs the support of the one, the power. And she goes because that's what this represents in its way, and prays desperately. Please, please don't let my mother die. I'll do whatever it takes, whatever. But if you let her die... She stopped herself. Threatening the one was fairly stupid, not to mention useless, and possibly, worst of all, rude. Yet her fear was slopping back and forth into anger, about once every 5 minutes, it seemed. Nita couldn't remember a time when her emotions had seemed so totally out of her control. She tried to get command of herself now. It was hard. Just, please, don't let her die. If you don't, I'll do whatever has to be done. I don't care what it is. I'm on your side, remember? I haven't done so badly before. I can do this for her. Let what I'm going to do work. Let me help her. Help me help her. I haven't asked you for much ever. Just give me this one thing. I'll do whatever it takes if you just let me save her. Help me save her. Let her live. And she does this incredibly heartfelt prayer and sits there waiting for something. And there's nothing. And she gets mad at herself for like kind of expecting anything and gets up to leave. And when she opens the church door, there is a hearse parking at the end of the block near the church sidewalk, getting ready for a funeral. And Nita sees this and like basically hustles it out of there, completely flipped out. And this is one of those things that I'm like, is this the lone power? Or is this a coincidence? Or is this any, like, what, you know? So they go to see her mother that night, and her mother had another bout of seizures. They don't even want to let them in to see her mom. She goes in, like, they wind up being allowed in as long as they promise not to wake her up because she's been sedated again. And one of the doctors says that she has been hallucinating a little. She was talking about the moon a lot when she first came to, something about walking on the moon. And she also kept repeating something about looking for the light, needing to use the light, and how all the little dark things were trying to hide the light from her. And Nita is just like, oh, God. So they go in there. She is looking at her mother and then looking up at her father and realizing what this means to her father, because they had been friends for a good long while before they ever became a couple. And there was this sort of joke in their circle that everyone else realized the two of them were a couple before they did. And so they're just, the relationship between them is so deep and real. And she suddenly gets this like flash of what her father's going through, and it's just too much for her, and she has to turn away. And she goes straight to the playroom, which is empty when she gets there. And she goes after the Colonel, which has sort of like wandered out of its usual spot, which it apparently does. And she goes over and grabs it and is messing with it. And as she is doing so, she sees Pralaya sit up and look around. Pralaya, they have just like a sort of, ordinary conversation about how things are going, how she's doing. She says, I'm scared a lot of the time. It makes it hard to work. Just another one of the lone one's favorite tactics, to use your own fear to make what you do less effective. And I'm like, girl, yes, but she does not keep this in mind later. It's a tactic that has another side, though, Pralaya says, one you can use to your advantage. Fear can keep you sharp and make you sensitive to solutions you might have not have seen otherwise. And Nita says, I guess we all wonder why the powers that be didn't just reverse what the lone power had done, or trash everything and start over. If they couldn't repair the damage. They got back to the furniture, and Nita dropped the Colonel to its more usual place on the table. The lone power's changing now, though, she said. Ever so slowly. So they say. Not that does us much good here and now. Falling's easy. Climbing's hard, and it has a long climb ahead. And meantime, we have to keep on fighting its many shadows among the worlds and in our own hearts, as if no victory'd been won. The shadows in our hearts, Nita said softly. She'd had too close a look at her own shadows when Doreen passed through her ordeal, and since then she had wished often enough that there were some way to get rid of them. But there wasn't. Not even wizards can make things happen just by wishing. So she says that she's going to go on her run, and Pralaya is saying he's going to stay and talk to Punt. And I love that there's a moment here where she says, lucky he was here, she thought. While Punt was friendly enough, there was a congenial quality about Pralaya that made him easier to work with. Oh. Was there? What's that? Is that anything? Because I feel like that's something. Like calls to like, perhaps? So, 2 hours by the playroom's time, much later by Nita's watch, she and Pralaya return to the playroom. And Nita has been through it. What is interesting here is that we don't actually see her bout with this other last training world before her mother's deal. It turns out that the whole thing was basically like dunes and tons of sand. And Pralaya says the symbolism's a good enough reflection of how a malignant illness like your mother's works. Scrape it away in one place, the cells just keep breeding, filling in the gaps. And as for the tubes and organs and so on, working with them as such wouldn't help you. It's not your mother's tubes you're trying to cure, it's all of her. A big job. Finding the colonel had not been difficult, much to her relief, though it had been hidden in what seemed a world's worth of desert, with only the occasional eroded skyscraper peak sticking up out of the sand. But the practice malignancy that the ascetic universe had created for her had been much more than she could handle. She had managed to get rid of the viruses in a large area of it, but only by brute force, rather than talking them out of what they were doing. There had been billions of them, as many of them as there had been grains of sand, and their response to Nita had been furious, a storm of self-preservation. More than once they had almost buried her under dune after rolling dune, and when she had run out of both energy and time that could be spent in that universe, even after blasting a clean, large part of that huge waste, she could feel the rest of it lying under the scorching, unfriendly sky, simply waiting for her to leave so that it could get on with what it had been doing, killing someone. So Nita's like, can I be honest? I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I really thought, but I'm starting to think I might not be able to do it. I thought loving her and the power of that was going to be enough. And I'm beginning to realize it might not be enough. And she says, it hurts knowing wizardry can do so much, but not this. It would almost have been better not to know it all. That can happen, Pralaya said to her. She looked up, shocked, for his tone was not precisely cautionary. Wizardry doesn't live in the unwilling heart, Pralaya said, again with that slightly remote tone. As you know, if it starts to hurt too much, you can always give it up. If I do that, then what's been given to me's been wasted. The universe would die a little faster because I threw away what the powers gave me to work with. Of course, you're the only one who can say whether it's worth it. And afterward, you wouldn't know. Forgetfulness would come soon enough. Your mother might still die, but at least you wouldn't feel guilty that you couldn't stop it. But also, you're acting as if your mother was doing something she wasn't going to do anyway. What? Die. We're all mortal. Even the longest lived of us, sooner or later, the bodies give up, wear out, run down. Matter-energy systems have that problem in the universes where living beings reside. I don't know of any solutions for that problem that are likely to do your species, or mine for that matter, much good. And she says, but it wasn't supposed to happen now. I'm just a kid, and my sister wasn't supposed to happen, Pralaya said. According to whom? Twist and turn as we may, sooner or later, we all come up against it. We do our service to the powers that be, but they do not always treat us in return as we feel we deserve to be treated. And then we look around us and begin to consider the alternatives. And she's finally like, oh, fuck. What are you doing here? She knows who he is. She says, how can you be you and Pralaya too? The same way I do it with you, the lone one said. You know the rule. Those who resist the powers, yet do the will of the powers. Those who serve the powers themselves become the powers. And if you serve them, then, if you're not careful, you also sometimes may serve me. I'm still one of them, no matter what they say. Sooner or later, Every wizard leaves me a loophole through which I can enter. Sooner or later, every wizard just wants to make a deal. Just one time. Sooner or later, every wizard gets tired of always having to go the way of the powers that be. The other powers, I mean. The way they insist it has to go. No room for flexibility in their way of thinking. No room for compromises. So unreasonable of them. But wizards have free will, and they don't always see things the powers' way. When they come around to that line of thinking, I'm always here. For Perlia, the loophole was curiosity. It still is. We've coexisted for some time. His people's minds are constructed differently from yours. They don't see an inexorable enemy when they see me, but part of the natural order of things. They've learned to accept death. Very civilized people. Perlia is a very skilled, experienced wizard. He had a long life. During it, various troubles have avoided him. That's been my doing. In return, occasionally I can exploit his acceptance of me to slip in when he lets his guard down and handle some business of my own. Y'all, this motherfucker, this bold motherfucker, she says the thing, which is, so you're saying if I gave up my wizardry, you'd save my mom. Why do I not totally believe you? And it sort of is like, well, I do bend the truth occasionally, but I don't see any reason why I wouldn't keep up my end of the deal on this. I mean, your life means more to me than your mother's because you're a wizard. So I don't mind keeping her alive. I don't care. But if I get to have you give your shit up, that's a much bigger win for me. And you won't even remember it. So, what do you even lose? I don't really see the downside for you other than losing some friends that you won't even remember you ever had. So what's that even matter to you, really? And he says, if you don't believe me, you go right on inside your mother as planned. Take Perlia with you. He'll be glad to help. But I'm telling you, you're still going to find it too much for you. The viruses will win in the end. I'm even willing to let you try to beat me fair and square and fail and still do you that last favor if you agree to the price. What if I refuse? Nita said. I couldn't care less, the Lone Power said. Stretch your power to the outermost. It won't help. The operation will end, and the doctors will get that tumor out all right. But even in the short run, it won't matter, because the viruses in your mother's body won't have listened to anything you have to say, and the secondary tumors will already be forming in her bone marrow and her pancreas and her liver. You'll have maybe a few more weeks with her. Or maybe you'll overextend yourself in the wizardry and leave your mother having to deal with the reality of your death while her own is creeping up on her. Nice going away present, that. Don't make up your mind right away. Think about it. You've got plenty of time. Until the morning after next, at least. And then you can slip inside your mother, find her kernel, the software to her soul, and do your best. And you'll make sure I fail? Far be it from me to be so unfair. There's a chance in 1,000,000 or 2 that you can save her, but your inexperience means that you'll have to do it by brute power fueled by despair, and you'll almost certainly die, either doing it or trying to. It'll be a lot easier my way. You go in, you fail, and then you agree to my price and I call off my little friends. Spontaneous remission, the doctors will all say afterward. Miracle cured. Everybody will be happy, most especially your dad. And as for you, you just don't have any more wizardry. Your mother doesn't even have to know about it. Or you can tell her you had to use it all up. And you'll be amazed how soon she stops bringing up the subject at all. This deal, he really does make it sound like it makes sense. He really manages to sell it. No matter what you've told your mother since she found out about your magic, she's never been entirely sure that you didn't get the wizardry somewhere, let's just say somewhere unhealthy. You'll be able to relieve her and your father of their concerns once and for all. And indirectly, their concerns about your little sister. I doubt even Doreen is going to rub their noses in her continued practice of wizardry when you've forgotten all about it. She'll go undercover, and you'll all just be a normal, happy family again. That particularly hurt. That one of your parents have always been a tiny bit suspicious that maybe whatever it is you're involved with is not good. And that hurts, like, in so many ways. Thinking that something that you were born to be and are, as much as your parents may affect acceptance, that maybe there's a tiny bit of them that can't help but think that's not right. Something about you, inherent to you, is not right. And that maybe they've just been doing their best to hide that, but it's still there. Hi, I hate it. Thanks. So he says that the other powers can't stop him because they would have to undo all of creation, since he has been here also since the beginning. I am still part of everything one way or another, and I will be until it all ends. But that's a long way ahead of us. There are more immediate concerns. You'll let me know what you decide sooner or later, and if you pay my price, your mother will live. I'll take my host home. It doesn't do for me to overshadow him for too long. He might get suspicious. You'll decide what to do, and when you head out to do your final intervention, you'll find Pralia waiting for you, ready to help you out. One way or the other. But one way or the other, I suggest you make your peace with the other powers that be. Your relationship with them isn't likely to last in its present form for much longer. What does that mean? Either way, your relationship won't last in its present form for much longer. We will get there. She goes home, falls into bed, and is desperate to talk to somebody about this, but Kit's asleep, and she doesn't know what to do. She can't fucking sleep. And she keeps thinking about how bad she needs Kit's help, but she doesn't want to allow him to come. It's a combo of her not wanting to be honest with him about what's at stake here, which I was very concerned that she wouldn't tell him the truth, and so gratified that she decided in the end to tell him everything. I really didn't think that she would, and I felt like that was going to be the most insidious poison of all, is lying to him about something of this magnitude. So, yeah, she decided to leave him behind, but just the fact that she told him, a bit of me feels like she told him because she knows she's making a wrong choice and she wants somebody to keep her from doing it. There's some psychology there, you know. This is something that we will do where we'll have this like conundrum and we think we should do A or B, and we have a strong feeling that B is really the right thing to do, but we know we can sell doing A to the right person. So we will get in touch with a person if we genuinely are trying to do the shady A thing. We'll get in touch with a person who we know has the same way of thinking about things that we do and is going to low-key support A and make us feel like maybe we're not such a bad person for picking A. But if we really have a pretty good moral compass, we'll call up the other friend and be like, all right, look, I keep wanting to do A and I know this is such a bad idea. Will you talk me out of it? I'm about to do A. I'm like right on the edge of it. Please. And that friend will be like, bitch, what the fuck? And that is pretty much what happens with Kit. I will get there in a second, though. because I love the way that this circulates in her mind. If Kit recognized its presence in Pralia, he was going to be furious that Nita was still working with him, which I couldn't totally believe, because its presence in Pralia isn't like, Nita has a bit of a connection to it herself, and I don't feel like its presence or its ability to use somebody as an avatar occasionally inherently makes them a bad person. It makes them susceptible. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should just not work with the person anymore. I don't know that he would react that way. And she thinks he's not going to understand what I'm up against. He will if you explain it to him, said the back of her mind. But Nita was already beginning to try to frame that explanation in her head, and the more she tried, the more it sounded like something that would simply make Kit think she had sold out to the lone power. And what if he's right? I'm like, yeah, maybe it sounds that way, 'cause it's what's happening. I know that sucks, but sometimes being like, it's not, I know how that sounds, but maybe that's just you trying to tell yourself it's not exactly what the fuck it looks like. Sorry, but occasionally a duck is a duck. You know, like, we love so much as human beings to act like, I know what everybody thinks is happening here, but trust me when I say that I have insight into this that they don't have, and it's not the way that it looks to literally everyone else. We want to be special. We want to have a special circumstance that other people just don't understand. I can tell you with 99% certainty that you begin trying to tell yourself that sort of story, and you are just paddling up denial river. That shit is fucking, you are doing something really predictable, involved in a situation that a lot of people recognize and know exactly what the fuck is going on. And you just hate that. And you don't want it to be the way it looks. That doesn't mean it's not the way that it looks. Sorry. You know, I've been there. Trust me. Like, when everything was going on with Owen and still being married to Brendan, I told myself everything you needed to tell yourself to try and act like, well, this isn't, I guess like it's an emotional affair, but like, I'm not sleeping with him. And Brendan and I have already started talking about divorce, and like acting like all of these factors were going to change the way that Brendan felt when he found out about this. And like that was going to ultimately matter in the fact that I had done something so dishonest and really been very like self-centered about the whole thing. I could even find friends who kind of understood where I was coming from on that and supported me in their way. That does not mean that it wasn't an affair. It was. That's what it was. There's just so much that you can say to try and camouflage a thing. So, and this is what winds up happening with Kit later is, again, he just cuts right to the heart of the thing. And she thinks about giving up wizardry and what that means. And the idea of, it says, the memory of it ebbing away until there was just a small nameless ache at the bottom of her that she would learn to ignore with time. The place where wizardry had been and wasn't anymore. So many people had that ache and thought it was normal. Eventually, Nita would just be one more of them. She would remember, if she remembered anything, those great games she used to play with Kit. That was all they would be. Memories of childhood fantasies. And he would still remember the reality, while Nita would pass him on the street maybe, or in school, and not know what he had been to her. Not really. But at least nobody would be dead. Except the part of you that the powers gave the wizardry to, Nita thought. Murdered, just as if you'd shot it with a gun. But how could it possibly be a good thing to do that no matter whose life it saved? And she's laying there, eventually begins to fall asleep. And all of a sudden, she wakes up And it is 11 o'clock in the morning. And she's like, what the fuck? Thinking she's late for school. And Dareen is right there and says, Dad called school. And she says, Dare, if giving up your wizardry would make Mom better, would you do it? I loved this because Dareen doesn't give her an answer. Dareen knows what this fucking question is and sort of crumples in on herself as the weight of it really settles, and she starts crying. And she says, if you were sure it would work. And Nita's like, I'm not. It's not, like, nothing is certain. And all Dareen can say then is, I'd miss you. I wouldn't be gone, Nita said. You know what I mean. Yeah, she said. I'd miss you too. So, she's working, and she hears a bang, and Kit and Paunch are here. And Kit comes in, and immediately is like, okay, what the fuck is up with you? And she's like, what do you mean? My mom's got cancer. What do you mean, what's up with me? You know what's up with me. And he's like, no. Don't you even fucking dare try to lie to me right now. I'm not an idiot. You know who I am. And I can see some shit has happened lately. And I would like for you to be fucking honest with me and explain what the fuck happened. And she tells him. First of all, she says, I'm not sure how he was doing that thing where he basically possessed Pralaya. And Kit's like, dude, you know that all the powers can do that. We had a macaw that had one's champion living inside it. Why wouldn't the lone power be able to do this too? And later on, he brings up the fact that this very obvious thing slipped her completely because she's so distracted and freaked out. And that maybe that's an indicator she's not thinking clearly about things, because this should have been something she figured out for herself. He says, I hate to say it, but this really looks like it's been getting at you. You're not thinking straight. How can you be sure you're thinking straight on everything else that's so important right now? If you accept its help, you're probably going to lose your wizardry, but what's more is that doing that is just wrong. And she says, it looks more and more like to save my mom, I'm going to lose it no matter what I do, or die trying, but I have to try. And he says, not alone, and not this way. You've got to know. You make a deal with that motherfucker, and it will backfire. You can't be this stupid. You know that. And she says, at this point, it's really easy for you to say that because your mother's not dying. And he says, that's fair, but you took an oath and you know what's right and wrong. I can tell that you know. I understand that you're messing around with a lone power and you're going to get burned. It's going to find some loophole to exploit just the way it always does and leave you out in the cold. Nita discovered she was actually starting to shake. He's right, but I'm right too. What do I do? So she tells him she's going to start around 8 in the morning because that's when the doctors are going to get started, and it will be easier for her to manage this if her mother is under sedation. And she, as he leaves, thinks that maybe she shouldn't go without him. And I was so hoping that she wasn't going to do that, but she does. So the rest of the day is a waking nightmare, as it is described to her. And Nita goes in to see her mother one last time before her surgery, and her mother attempts to comfort Nita. She says, don't look at me like that. I look like the bride of Frankenstein. I know that. It's all right. I was due for another haircut anyway. Two things hit Nita at once. The first thing was that, as always, her mother was trying to take care of her, even when she herself was sick. The second, which struck Nita with a terrible inevitability, was that what her mother was saying was not true. It would never be all right. Never again. Her mom was really going to die. And I was like, but you don't know that. You don't. You don't. Stop it. She's letting this inevitability and this fatalism infect her so that she just throws caution to the wind because it feels like nothing matters. The moment decided her. Kit or no kit, lone one or not, she would do anything she had to do to save her mother. Give up her wizardry, agree to whatever had to be agreed to. She was lost. But at least I know now, she thought. The rest of the visit passed in a kind of cheerful fog of small talk, all of it forced. Is it going to be all right? Tarine said. Yeah, Nita said. One way or another. So then we go to Friday morning. And she tells her dad that she's going to be out for a while doing this. And not to wait up for her. And Doreen comes up to her and tells her, just come back. And is crying. And Nita is like, oh God, I mean, I can't guarantee that I, as I am, will be what comes back. But I can't tell her this. So she just hugs her and says, don't forget to give the surgeons whatever energy they need. And then she heads out, leaving Kit behind. So Kit heads out to see her and immediately realizes that she has left without him. And he's like, I don't even know what to do. Like, how? And Ponch is like, dude, hi, hello. I can find her. What are you talking about? I can smell her. And Ponch says, I know her scent. We can be where she's gone. Let's go. So they head to the playroom. And he comes in there, and there are a bunch of wizards there that are alien. And she tries to ask them if they know where Nita went, and they are very weird about it. And he understands that maybe they see him as somebody trying to interfere with her shit. And the Sulamid, which is the one that had its eyes, I believe, that were staring at her in the way that it did, says she has gone into the dark all too accompanied, and her destination is an unknown. How do you know? Kit asked after a moment. Vision is useless without comprehension. Comprehension is bootless without compassion. The Sulamid bowed once again, if a bow was what it was. It was not directed at Kit, but at Ponch. Pathfinder, seer for the seer in the dark, tracker in the night places. Wait. And it vanished too. So Kit's looking around like, what the fuck? And here comes the pig. I love this. The transcendent pig. And they have quite a conversation here. Kit says, you've seen Nita? Yes, I'm with her now, in fact. You are? It wouldn't be a terribly useful kind of transcendence if I wasn't. Being everywhere at once is part of the job description. Where is she? What is she doing? Oh, come on now. You know the drill. Or you should. You tell me 3 truths that I don't know, and I tell you 1. That doesn't sound real fair. If you knew how much trouble a human being can get into with just 1 truth, you wouldn't be asking for more. So Kit's like, okay, fine, let's do this. I'm looking for the wizard who's meant to be my partner. The first part I know perfectly well. The second part is conditional. Meant? What exactly would it be that's doing the meaning? I think the day we find that out for sure, it might all be over. I'm tempted to give you that one. From a member of Homo sapiens, a secondary insight is relatively unusual these days, but a half-truth is a half-truth. Give me a whole one this time. Kit thought for a little while more. My dog makes alternate universes, ones that no one's ever seen before. They're new. That is news. Continuous creation? You've got me. Yes, but let's leave that issue out of it for the moment. I love this whole conversation so much. So, I think that my partnership with Nita is about to get totally screwed up if I don't do something and I'm not sure what to do. I have to find her. But after that, I'll grant you that, the pig said. So that's 2.5. What else have you got? And this is when Kit pulls out that little kernel. And the pig is like, oh, a gleed. Huh. It's sometimes called a dragon's eye. The idea was you might draw a dragon, but the eyes were where the soul was, some people thought. And the drawing wouldn't come to life until the eyes were added. Fine. Put it away. Where did you find it? And Kit says, in the dark, when I stopped making things and just let the night be what it was. Kit found the pig watching him closely. Over time, and outside it too, other beings have moved over and through that darkness one way or another. Some of them have found or brought back objects like that, what the void brings forth in silence. The question afterward has always been what to do with them. What do I do with it? Kit said. That's hardly one of the traditional questions. And eventually he's like, but I am bored. I would demand a whole third truth from you and tell you one of the truths you originally asked for, but there's a gleed to consider. And besides, I've always been a sucker for for people in your situation. And I'm like, what does that mean? What did you almost just say, pig? What was that? I heard you. I heard you. Mm-hmm. Okay, I see you. So then, he says, Kit thought for what seemed to him like hours, and finally, looking up, he said, how can I save her? The pig rolled its eyes. Her, or her mother? And Kit just smiles, and the pig is like, oh, you fuck. Fuck. That's pretty good. That's not really fair. But, okay, fine. Fuck, though. And I just love this so much. He says, as you know, Nita is attempting an intervention to save her mother's life. Unfortunately, that intervention has been contaminated by the lone power from the start, and therefore has little chance of succeeding and much chance of backfiring, with results such as you should be able to imagine. Then all of a sudden, Kit goes, wait a minute. I knew that. Wait. Hold on. You knew the lone one was talking to her this whole time and you didn't tell her? She didn't ask, the pig said. Questions are important, and there's not a lot I can do without them. Don't look so shocked. The powers that be have the same problem, but it wasn't my business to tell her. For one thing, on some level, she knows. That one can never make itself completely unrecognizable, and that's its own fault. You set yourself apart from all previous creation, fine, but you're going to look and feel different to all creation afterwards. What's more important is that the way she deals with the realization when she comes up with it herself is likely to be crucial to what she's working on. That I wouldn't interfere with even if I could, and you were smart. So I would think you wouldn't either. But if I were you, I'd listen carefully to my hunches when everything goes dark. You never know, you might hear something useful. Okay, Kit said. Thanks. That's it, the pig said. Thanks a lot, Kit said. Well, I can't fault your manners, the pig said. And it got up and wandered away. So, Kit asks Ponch what he thinks of this. And Ponch says, I think it's cheating. It shouldn't be that easy. And Ponch says, it's all right. I know her scent. I got it fresh yesterday. It hasn't changed that much. And Kit's like, changed? And as soon as he says that, I'm like, oh no. And sure enough, when we go back to Nita, we only get a brief time with her, which is good since I have run out of time. But when we go back to her, Nita has lost her connection. And she can't sense the Colonel anymore. It had been something she was very good at. Every other practice world, no problem. But the fact that she has realized she's willing to throw in with the lone power to get what she wants means that the connection she had to that life force, which is from the powers that be, is not there. And that was what she was using to sense wherever it was. Now, she has thrown in with entropy, which means that she doesn't have that connection to the life force anymore that she can track down that way. And she doesn't seem to have figured out that's what's happened. She's just like, this is harder than it usually is. That's weird. And I'm like, bitch, wake up. It's not just, oh, it's harder. You are different now because you fucked up. You had to know that. Come on. But apparently she didn't, because she's not thinking clearly, which is exactly what Kit said. It's such a shame that when we're not thinking clearly is when we are the most unwilling to hear anyone say to us that we're not thinking clearly. It's just the worst. But yeah. And she kind of snaps at Pralaya at one point. And it's such a shame because Pralaya doesn't know what's going on. Pralaya isn't aware that he's taken over by the lone power occasionally. So when she kind of bites his head off, he gets a little bit hurt by it. And I feel really bad because Pralaya apparently like let it in somehow. But I also still don't feel like it's quite its fault. Like, that's just part of being a person, I would imagine, is that happens. And I don't want to blame it. And I hate that she bites Pralaya's head off that way when he doesn't deserve it. And she sort of she apologizes, but she can't even be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, because she knows that she did when she said it. It's just awful. So the chapter ends with them, they are in a flooded version of New York City. And there are things in the water that she has to like use one of her enchantments on her bracelet to protect them from. And she thinks about how like ironic it is that she's protecting Pralaya from things created by the lone power, even though Pralaya has been taken over a little bit by the lone power. But again, how much is that Pralaya's fault? How much can you actually blame a person for that happening? I don't know. And that is the end of the section. So, there's only one section left. Friday afternoon and dawn. And I am very worried about what's going to happen. I just don't really know how this is going to fix itself. And I have to think it will. But it may be that it fixes itself in that Nita comes to terms with the fact that her mother is just going to die. And I don't love it. I mean, in a way, that would be a very brave thing to do. I think it would be an important lesson to teach kids that are reading books like this, that sometimes shit is fucking terrible. And that's just how it goes. And you can't fix it. And that's part of being alive. On the other hand, I don't want to see that. You know? So, yeah. I will have to just wait and see. But thank you again, Devin, so much for commissioning this episode. Devin and Yamo were going back and forth a little bit in the chat laughing at me. So thanks for that. And I hope you guys are enjoying the coverage. And I will be seeing you again soon, hopefully, with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.